Hello and welcome to the fireworks tutorial. In this tutorial I am going to show you how you can create realistic looking fireworks within After Effects, like this one here. So let's get started. At first we are going to create a new composition, and we don't take a standard size, we make it a square, so let's say 2000 by 2000 pixels. Okay, now let's create a new solid. The color doesn't matter, we make it comp size and click OK. And the first effect we are going to bring out is the grid effect. So we type in here grid and just bring it out here. And that's what it looks like. We have a grid, and later on those grid lines, those borders here, are representing the streaks of our fireworks. So we have to make the border size a bit bigger so that it has the size which we want for our firework later on. And like 30 should be fine. And we can click over here to choose a color which we want for our fireworks, and for now I just make it red, but I'll show you later on how you're also able to change the color after you have finished your firework. So we click OK, and the next effect which we are applying is the noise effect. So let's just type in noise, and we want to have the fractal noise. So let's bring this out, and if I just hide the grid for now and we just take a look at the fractal noise, this is what it looks like. It just basically generates black and white pixels to get this noisy feeling. And we have to make a few changes here. Let's change the noise type to linear, and we want this to have more contrast, so let's bring up the contrast to, let's say, 500 or so. So we just type in 500. And we bring down the brightness, which gives it also more contrast, about -60 or so. And if we scrub through the timeline, you can see that there's no animation yet. So let's change this, and you can see that we have this evolution wheel here, and if I just rotate it around, you can see that noise is animating. So let's quickly type in an expression for the evolution. We can do that by simply hold down the Alt key and click on the evolution stopwatch, and now we just type in time times 400. And what this does, it just looks at the current time and multiplies it with 400 and takes this value as an evolution value. So as I scrub through it now, you can see that it is animating and the value here is changing. Okay. And for now, let's just call this one firework streaks. And we now turn on the grid. And as you see, the red of the grid is just showing at the border here. So to change that, we just change the blending mode of the noise effect to multiply. And now we have this red grid, which is animating. But of course our firework doesn't look like a grid. It has to generate streaks out of the center which are animating with the noise effect. So let's change this, and for this we simply apply the flomotion effect by typing in flomotion and bring it out here. And by the way, if you want to learn more about the flomotion effect, you can just go over to motionworks.com.au, and there you'll find a whole tutorial about the flomotion effect, which I am presenting. Okay, so what this effect, the flomotion effect, basically does, it has two nut points, point 1 and point 2, and you can suck the whole frame into those points. So if I drag up the amount, you can see that everything is sucked into this position. So let's just bring this position to the middle of the frame. And now we can bring up the amount. And we can also play around with the fall-offs until we have something that looks like streaks which are going outwards. And you can later on always go back into those settings and play around with them until you get the final look. Okay, and now let's just give this composition a name by clicking here with the right mouse button, composition settings, and call this also firework streaks. And click OK. And now we can find it in the project files here. And if we just take it and drag it down to this new composition icon, we have it in a new composition. Let's quickly rename this to full firework. And for now, we can also change the width and the height, because the size of the firework should be way smaller than the size of the composition. So let's for now just change this in width for, say, 4000 and height 8000. And by the way, you don't have to take those big values. I just choose them because I wanted to make a HD video for my final render, but you can really keep your composition settings smaller if you want to. And I choose OK. And now you can see that we have our firework. Let's just position this at the top here. And what we have to do now is we have to create a mask around our firework so that it gets round. And we can do this by clicking on this mask tool here and just choose the ellipse tool and just drag around mask around the firework. Doesn't has to be perfect, because I guess a firework also doesn't look that perfect. You can move the mask by double clicking on it, and you can always just position it the way you want it. And if we double click on it again, we have the layer again. Okay, and now we have to feather the mask, and for that we can bring out the feather here, or if we just hit F for feather, we can bring up the mask feather. Okay, and we can hide the mask with this small icon here. And it already starts looking like a firework. But we want to play with this a bit more. Let's make a new composition out of this, and I show you why we do this. So let's for now just leave it like that and apply the radial blur to it. And if I now just bring out the amount and change it to fading zoom, and I bring it up real high, you can see that it's blurring the edges, but just until it reaches the border of our firework streaks layer here. So let me just delete this radial blur, and we make a new composition by clicking on the firework streaks layer, pre-compose, it's all the way down here, and we just call it firework streaks final, and move all attributes into the new composition and click OK. And now we once again apply the CC radial blur, and we just have to position the center now into the middle of our firework, otherwise it would be in the middle of the whole composition. And if we now change the type again to fading zoom and bring up the amount, you can see what this is doing. And to animate the firework, I simply animated the scale of the firework. So let me do this. For that, we have to position our anchor point in the middle of the firework. And to do that, we go to the pen behind tool over here and click on our layer. And now we get the anchor point, and we just bring it into the middle of our firework. And if we want our firework to start at 4 seconds, let's just go to the 4-second mark, type in S for scale, set a keyframe, and we bring it down to 0. Go forward a few frames. and just type in 100. You can see that the firework is now exploding. And as you can see, the streaks are also animating because of our noise which we have applied. And let's just bring this out here. And from this point in time, we hit T for opacity, set a keyframe, go forward a few frames, just bring it down to 0. Okay, and that's how I did the firework. I just made a few more changes. The first thing is that I applied a glow effect. So if I go to the effects and presets, just type in glow and bring it over here or over the composition, it doesn't matter. You can see that it now starts glowing, and you can play with the radius, that it glows even more, or with the intensity. But I just leave it at the defaults because they are already looking nice. And another thing which I did was I brought out the exposure and bring it out here. And I just keyframed the exposure from the beginning of the explosion. Go into the master exposure, set a keyframe, make it 0, go forward a few frames, bring it up, let's 1.5, go forward a few frames and bring it back to 0. It gives it more the feel of the explosion. Another thing I did is when I finished all of these effects, I simply duplicated the whole layer, scaled this one down a bit. Just have to be aware that you don't mess up your keyframes. So, and maybe rotate it a bit. If you just hit W, you can rotate it. You can change the blending modes over here, maybe to something like add or so. And then what I told you in the beginning, you can change the color of the fireworks by applying a tint effect. So you type in tint, bring it out here by simply double clicking or dragging it out here. And what you want to do now, you want to take the white color and apply the color you want for it. And in combination with the new blending mode, it really looks nice. And I guess I used 3 or 4 copies of the firework for this. That is how I created a firework with the flomotion effect. And I'm now going to show you how I animated this small rocket which is flying up and is bringing the firework into the sky. But for that I simply turn off this firework because you may have noticed that all of those effects are really slowing my computer down. And what I did in my composition was that I simply rendered out the firework as a movie file and imported it, and I just worked with the finished firework and not with all those different layers and effects and blending modes and all that stuff. So that's why I now just turned it off and just show you how I did this small rocket flying in the air. And for that we just have to create a new layer, a new solid, and the color once again doesn't really matter, and we just call it rocket. Make it the same composition size and click OK. And of course I used particles for this. So I just typed in particle and I choose particle systems 2 and just brought them out here. I guess there are many different particle effects which you could use, and I think that all of them are able to do something like a rocket effect because it's just some basic changes which you have to do. So if you have an other particle emitter plugin installed, just feel free to use yours. And I guess the settings must be somehow the same in each particle creator. So let's take a look at this one. If I just grab through, the particle system is doing what it's supposed to do. It's emitting particles. So let's just make a few changes over here. We just want to go into the producer and into the position, and we want our rocket to fly up from the 2-second mark until the 4-second mark, and then the firework explodes. So we go to the 2-second mark, make a position, keyframe, and just bring it down here. And the radius is a bit big, so we just bring it to 1 for now. Then we go into the physics. We don't want any velocity, so let's just bring this one down. And we don't want gravity. And maybe make this also smaller, like 0.2, and this one also 0.2. Okay, now we really have a small starting point. And if we go forward to the 4-second mark now, click on the position and bring it up, you can see that it's now animating this streak, this rocket fire. So you can see that it's now shooting up into the air, but of course this streak is a bit too long for us. And we can change this by just changing the longevity, which means this is how long each particle lives somehow in this animation. So if we bring the longevity down, let's say to about 0.2 seconds, looks quite realistic. And if we go closer now, you can see that we can change the look of this with the longevity, and we get the length of this rocket streak here, and with the birth rate we get how many particles are there in the frame. And now you just have to position everything right, which means the firework should come up all the way. And now what you would have to do is center your firework here. Let me just quickly do this. Over here, and as the firework is exploding, you want to keyframe the opacity of our particle rocket. So this is how I animated the firework and how I produced the small rocket flying in the air. And just some small thing which you could do to the rocket: when you position it, you can just make the last keyframe a easy ease keyframe. In this way, just slows down when it goes up. And let me give you just one last tip. For that I make a new composition. For now, let's don't make it that big, let's make it standard size, 1280 by 720, click OK. So let me just quickly bring out this proxy, which is the rendered movie file of the firework, which I have done in my example. And let's bring out one of those foreground elements, which I made it simply a gray solid, on which I just applied a mask and make it look like the skyline. And what I did now is I created a new adjustment layer and made a mask around the firework, applied once again the exposure to it, and when the firework is now exploding, I just animated the exposure, which should look like the houses and the skyline is lit by the firework. Of course, we have to feather the mask. And this is just a quick tip how you can make your animations look more convincing. See how this firework is lighting those houses here. Okay, enough tips for now. Now it's your time to start experimenting in After Effects.